Oh, Sandy, oh,
I'll
okay.
leave the rest to the.
I'm so used to seeing Sandy on the screen that I forget.
I would appreciate your support on the letter.
So wait a minute, there's some irony here, isn't it? COVID irony,
The old
but
people.
all the old ones are in person. The youngest two members aren't. Trying to kill us all.
There we go.
You know, it's, they've got kids. I'm fine with.
I'm joking, I don't
I know,
care.
I know.
Okay, well, it is about a minute after 6 o'clock, based on the clock on the wall. So we will go ahead and get started with this council committee of the whole meeting. I would like to thank everyone for being here, and we have quite a few things to get through tonight. I'll start by saying City Attorney Mike Marsh is here if anyone has any questions for him. And Heather, who do you have here?
We have Chris Mowen of the HPC, Historic Preservation Commission, Will Raudebush of the Historic Preservation Commission, John Sampin, the chairperson of the Historic Preservation Commission, and Les Barber, the secretary of the Historic Preservation Commission.
Okay. All right. So that's that. I would like to thank everyone for the work that they did and for sharing that work with everyone. I'm sure we all had a very busy weekend looking over everything. I guess to start out, as I mentioned in the email I sent out on Saturday, I'd kind of like to, for the sake of organization, use the version that we received on 2/5/21 as a step-by-step while walking through this. But prior to beginning that, I think maybe there might be a few things that we can address right off the top. For example, we received the 3 changes from the Historic Preservation Commission that came out of the process with the Planning Commission. Would it be all right with everyone if we accepted those changes, or does anyone see that they might be problematic somehow?
Mr. President, I see no problems with these, and I suggest we accept the changes. They're very, very minor. Change of words, doing away with one whole statement. And I think we do address 1503X and 15803. Don't have my glasses on. X and 15807A3. I think that is addressed, and changes have been made by Rachel to that section, which may clarify it. I could be wrong, but it has to do with maintenance, and they just wanted an emphasis on ordinary maintenance, and it doesn't have to be everything, just ordinary maintenance, small sections only. But I think we're going to touch on that later also, just that one
Okay.
out of the 3.
Are there any other comments about whether or not to accept these to start out with? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, we'll check that one off. Next, with regard to the information that Rachel sent to us, and I'll say straight off the top that I am not an attorney, nor do I have the desire to ever be an attorney. Not that it isn't a noble profession, but I'm a little late in years to branch out into something like that. Rachel, I was wondering if you could just sort of give us a quick overview of what it is you've provided us with without going into, a lot of detail. Oh, just a minute, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm wasting precious moments. Okay, so I provided the group with 158.06, which is the procedure for designating listed properties in historic districts, and 158.07 and 158.08. 158.07 deals with and 08 deal with certificates of appropriateness. And so my goal in reworking these two sections was to make them more clear and address any inconsistencies that I saw, but I really tried not to make any substantive changes. That's short and sweet description, Mark. Did you need
Okay.
more information than that?
Well, so then my understanding, based on reading through these and listening to what you've said, is that what you have done is gone through and addressed some problems that you saw in these sections and corrected them, but you have not made substantive changes to the ordinance, except to correct some problems.
Yeah, I tried to gather all of the parts of the entire legislation that dealt with designating listed properties in historic districts and clear that up and put that in one section. So, property owners, the Historic Preservation Commission could find that all in one place. And then I did the same thing on the COA process in 158.07. I did make substantive changes. For example, in 158.06, I added at the very bottom of that section a process for rescinding designation. So there are some substantive changes, but I noted those in the documents I sent y'all, and those were minor compared to my work to just make sure everything was in one place and clear.
Okay.
So, Mr. President, then, I've read Rachel's comments too, and I move that we adopt her revisions for purpose of discussion this evening. And that will allow us, when we get to those sections, to review her section versus the original ones, and any changes necessary, we can avoid looking at two sections at once. So I move that we adopt, for purposes of discussion this evening, sections 158, 06, 07, and 08, as Rachel has amended.
Second.
Well, and we don't really need a motion in a second. We're kind of informal, but I understand. So all in favor of adopting these three sections that Rachel has provided us with changes, say aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Rachel, I was hoping that your change took into account one of the changes that the commission members wanted, and that has to do with repairs and maintenance. I didn't rewrite everything you changed on my draft. I just noted that you had changed it. They wanted to make certain that only small sections of deteriorated awnings, roofs, walls, chimneys, windows, and doors would be changed. And I'm going to let them expand on it if they wish to do so. That's under 158.07, item 3, currently.
So what exactly are you asking for clarification?
I wanted to know if her wording changed, since she's not actually saying it, would satisfy the wishes of the commission that only small sections of deteriorated things can be changed.
May I jump in, Sandy? It looked, I heard was that maybe you were looking to the audience for the HPC to weigh in. They certainly can, or may I say something real quick?
No, I wanted you first to
Okay.
touched on the essence of that. And then
Okay.
allow the commission to weigh in.
Okay, so if I understand your question correctly, the document that you sent that included the 3 changes that the HPC was requesting, the ordinary maintenance definition in .03,
0.03. Okay,
yep, 158.03. So that is where there's a discussion of preventative maintenance. Is that the question you're asking? If 158.07, which has to do with the COA application procedure,
Uh-huh.
if that incorporates the changes that they were requesting to the definition of ordinary maintenance, is that accurate?
Okay, ordinary maintenance includes preventative maintenance in the repair of features.
Yeah. So I think that this question of ordinary maintenance is still an open question for the group. It's something that I think we really need to focus on to make sure that it's clear, because the HPC the legislation, the HPC is not going to require a COA where it is just ordinary maintenance. So we need to make sure that's crystal clear in 158.06 now, my version of it. I think that it, I don't think that it contradicts ordinary maintenance definition right now, but I want us to look closely at that.
We have someone from the commission that has their hand up to respond to you. And Mr. President, I'm
Go ahead,
sorry.
Les. I can't see
I
you.
knew you couldn't see, so that's why I was saying.
The issue there was a simple issue of contradiction between the definition of ordinary maintenance and what we said about it in 107, the original 107. And so we were just proposing to change the definition to get rid of that contradiction. And I can't remember whether Rachel's changes incorporate that.
Well, so
or not.
now,
I
Les,
suspect they do, but I think the most important thing is to change the definition so that it
Maintenance,
doesn't
yeah.
allow for the possibility that you could replace the whole section of a house without a COA.
Yeah,
Sorry, that's.
Anyway, Sandy, I
that's
think that if we,
that's my understanding of the intent too. So I was trying to accomplish that, but the definition section is really where that's important.
yeah,
This can be addressed when we look at the definition of ordinary maintenance.
I think so too.
Okay.
and someone, maybe I changed it, I don't remember anymore, I've read so much. It one time said ordinary maintenance includes the repair or in-kind replacement of features, including but not limited to roofs, eaves, downstairs. And there is a change here, and I kind of now think I made the change, saying ordinary maintenance includes preventative maintenance in the repair of features. So I think that's something that the commission wanted. So, but Greg wanted to say something.
I was
too.
going to say, I think we'll get to this when we address definitions.
Okay,
So we were in the middle of a vote. Are you,
Opposed, same sign.
I'm going to agree that we move on.
Okay. I see no opposition. Okay. All right. The next major item that we have comes from Councilmember Dennis. And I was wondering, much in the way Rachel did, if you could summarize briefly what it is you've provided us with and what exactly it entails.
Well, no, I don't know if I can summarize that briefly. Rachel and myself, along with the Historic Preservation Commission, have spent significant time over the weekend reorganizing a lot of what they've had here. So I guess I'm not sure which item you're referring to.
I'm just talking about in general. So the information you provided us with is primarily reorganizational and doesn't fundamentally change anything?
I think probably the most significant change that I made here was consolidating several of the definitions, which I think made it a little bit more shorter, and I know for me at least a lot more clear.
Okay. Is there any discussion on what Jeff has
I don't see.
applied?
What?
Do you guys want to go through each one, or I don't know what the preferred?
I find it very difficult to look at that as a whole. It's not a redlined document, and when I look at it, I think we'd be better off if we had approached this section by section and just walk down the definitions, and if anybody wants to change one, or we can address them as we go.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Mr. Harold.
first of all, thanks, Rachel and Jeff for all the work that you did on it, and also Greg. And I think that the approach that Jeff took made it difficult to go line by line through it, because he was rearranging whole sections and trying to consolidate it. So I don't know if it would do justice to the work that Jeff put in if we went line by line, because he's, of necessity, he's rearranged things and put them in a different order. But I don't see any way around it other than if we just said, hey, you know what, let's incorporate what Rachel said, what Sandy said, what the Historic Preservation Commission said, what Greg said, and what whoever I left out said, and come up with a new document. We've right now in your effort to have us going from one document, we're already jumbling a little bit. And I guess what I'm saying is I understand why Jeff did what he did, because there was no other way around it to clear up the procedure. And I don't know if we'll capture all of that if we go line by line. It'll at least be a challenge.
Mr. President,
Go ahead.
I mean, I'm fine going through line by line. I guess I was just saying that I can't, I don't know that it would be the best use of everybody's time for me to do that, independently right now. If we want to start at the top, though, I'm more than happy to chime in when that's appropriate and give my feedback.
Well, my original thought was to go with the 2/5/21 document and just go section by section.
Seems fair.
And so when you feel it's appropriate, Jeff, if it's something that your revisions touch on, bring them up at that time. Would that be all right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of what I had envisioned, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
But we've already decided to go through Rachel's revision instead of,
I haven't.
we voted on it.
Is that what we're voting on?
That's what I thought we were voting
I
on.
thought
is
we
to
were
go through
voting-
Rachel's
I thought
version,
we were
'cause the
voting-
moment
I-
we vote on that, it's like, I didn't bring
Well, that was
Rachel's
That was
version.
only sections,
Well, if we get
right?
there,
I voted to incorporate her things, but for the purpose of
Well-
discussion, I wanted to follow 2/5/21.
I think that's a good start. And if we have to relook our vote when we get to her sections, but we did vote to substitute them, which is incorporating because they're wholesale changes.
Okay, well, for the sake of organization and because I too only for the sake of not wasting lots of paper printed out the original copy, I would like to go line by line with the original.
Concur.
Okay.
I concur too.
Okay, so let's start with 158.01 title. Is there anyone that has an issue with the title? Okay. 158.02 statement of purpose. Is there anyone that has anything in this section that they are committed to changing? Okay. 158.03 definitions. All right. This is going to take some time. We can just go definition by definition. A, are there any suggestions with A?
Greg has,
Mm-mm.
didn't you?
No.
Didn't you delete non-contributing?
Oh,
under?
let me, Mr. President, let me just add that one thought I had was that a number of us have pointed out some minor grammatical errors, punctuation errors, spelling errors. I would suggest that we simply, if we have concerns about those after this meeting, after we're done approving the document, simply forwarding those to Kay for her consideration and incorporation, because they add nothing or take away nothing from the substance. So rather than talk about grammar and spelling here, we just defer that.
Okay,
Okay. All right. B,
Well,
go ahead.
Jeff, do you want to make a case for alteration?
Yeah, so here I think that the length of this paragraph can be cut in half, and correct me if anybody thinks there's a better way to do this, but I've got any visual, structural, or material change, including any demolition, construction, preservation, restoration, reconstruction, or rehabilitation activities which impact the exterior of the property as defined by this section. Alteration also includes any change in design, texture, material, or architectural feature as defined by this section. So there are several terms there that are consolidated into the meaning of alteration. So throughout this document, rather than say construct, demolish, renovate, restore, preserve, just the word alteration.
I also like it because at the end of the original alteration definition, there's an attempt to distinguish it from ordinance. I think that's better handled in the ordinance definition. I think that's where Jeff moved it.
Okay. You kind of faded out there for a second, but
Sorry.
you're suggesting the ordinary maintenance section of this definition doesn't need to be in here, or?
Yeah, I mean, so Jeff moved that. That makes some sense to me. I was
Right.
just tagging on to what he said.
Okay. So, what suggestions do I have for A?
The language, they're suggesting, Mr. President, the language that Jeff prepared.
So we change the definition to Jeff's definition.
Well, that's just clarifying what's on the table here, but yes, that's
Right.
the proposal.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay.
Mr. President, I mean, representatives from the HPC that are in the room have, I've only talked to Les. I talked to Les quickly last night, but it was my understanding that he thought Jeff's definitions, captured and everything, or the HPC's intent. I would love to hear from him a little bit more about that if I'm not misstating him, but that to me was went a long way. Like if we didn't miss anything, if Jeff didn't miss anything in trying to clean up these definitions, to me, they seem a lot more simple than as originally proposed. So for what that's worth, I would like to hear from Les, or maybe someone, see if that is actually the consensus of the HPC.
Les, could you speak to the definition section?
Just a quick overview. I spent time working on all of the revisions, working with all of the revisions that Rachel suggested and all of the ones that Jeff has suggested. And we did some back and forth, and we wound up with me agreeing on behalf of the commission, although we have not met, obviously, and therefore I'm taking it as a hopeful article of faith that they agree with me, that everything that Jeff and Rachel proposed tonight is okay with us.
Okay, so I don't want to overstate anything, but is the suggestion then, Rachel, that the corrections to definitions as made by Jeff, you're suggesting that maybe they're acceptable to all of us? We don't need to go through them definition by definition?
I'm not suggesting anything on behalf of you, Mark. I'm just suggesting on behalf, I like Jeff's definitions. I've read them 13 times today. And I think there is a lot of value. And even if we would accept them wholesale, all of 158.03 right now, that we go through them and make sure we're all on the same page, because they do change things. He gets rid of some defined terms. So I think that it's still important to go through these line by line, but sure, if you're asking for some sort of motion to accept 158.03 as proposed by Jeff, I would so move.
Yeah.
And if she did move that, I would second it, and then we can always make individual changes if need be, but that gives us Jeff's framework, which I don't have in front of me, but to me, the work that Jeff put in and that working with Rachel and having Les put his stamp of approval on it, I think that's a strong argument.
Mr. President, I would also add that if I recall properly from Mr. Marsh's comments, he made reference to the work that Rachel was doing in Jeff, and felt, I mean, I guess I felt that he was supportive of it. I'm not going to say word for word he was supportive of it, but maybe he wants to talk.
He did this.
It sounds
Okay,
like,
and I can't see him.
sounds like a
Okay.
vote of support.
Okay,
Mr.
thumbs up.
President,
He got a thumbs up for you on the screen.
Thank you. Mr. President, I did have, there are actually several definitions here that I would like clarification on. So I would not like to adopt what
Okay.
I've written here. Would it be helpful if I shared my screen though? I think that we can do that. No?
You should be able to share, Jeff.
Okay. Let me, can you guys see that? 2 Word documents?
Yeah, you're gonna have to walk us through that.
Yeah, we can see the document, but we can't read it.
Okay.
Which specific definition do you want to address first?
Well, I'd probably start at the top and work our way down, I suppose.
Mr. President, I have Jeff's definitions here. Would it behoove us to make copies of this and look at this, or would that facilitate?
Is this directly from the first document you sent?
No, that's the Friday night draft. This is the 5 o'clock this afternoon draft.
Okay, well then, how about this? We'll just go down each one. If no one has a problem with it, we'll move to the next one until we get to one that someone wants to have a discussion on.
Jeff, could you just email us your 5 o'clock draft right now?
Yes.
Okay, I'll be home. I'll be back in about 15.
I think printed copies would help.
Is it-
Yeah,
Email to Lori Treader as well.
Okay. Is she able to make copies for everybody?
Yes.
Is that what you're getting at? Okay.
Yep.
Great.
we could-
Are you guys saying you can't read that?
Oh, is the font really small?
There's some yellow up there.
Yeah.
No,
I do, and I'm making sure it doesn't break.
I don't have one. I'll have one soon.
Okay, I just sent that.
You already
you
broke.
didn't get-
I did, but I gave it to Jeff.
I have. My-
Well, while we're
We wanna
waiting,
move to
Jeff,
the next
why don't you direct us towards the definition we're going to look at first, or are we starting with B applicant.
Well, I guess one kind of larger question as we're going through this, ordinary maintenance. I mean, what are we defining as ordinary maintenance? And we've already touched on this, but that's kind of going to, I mean, anything that is ordinary maintenance is excluded from this ordinance. That seems like a very important term to define.
Okay, well, let's focus on ordinary maintenance right now. According to the original document, under ordinary maintenance, it includes repair or in-kind replacement of features, including but not limited to the roof, eaves, downspouts, sidings, windows, and doors of a listed property or a non-contributing property located within a historic district. That such ordinary maintenance does not result in the change of material, texture, architectural feature. For the purposes of this chapter, sandblasting of masonry and chemical cleaning of masonry is not considered ordinary maintenance. All right, so it sounds like there's a lot of attention that's needed to ordinary maintenance, and I'm open to suggestions.
In this one, I think that the commission recommended early on that it be preventative maintenance and the repair of features. And there's 2 thumbs up in the audience from the commission.
Wanted to get rid of the reference to in-kind replacement. And it's defined differently. originally.
And you guys have left
Yeah,
onto the.
there's 3 different references to what it is, I think.
You'd like Les to come and explain that into the microphone?
Yeah, I couldn't hear any of that.
Okay.
It's our payback
Maybe
for
I should
not
just
seeing
sit
the.
by the podium.
Okay, this is the place where there is a contradiction with another provision in original 15807. And so we would like this to read the maintenance and repair of features, dropping in-kind replacement.
And did you want preventative put in there also?
Um,
For some reason, I put it in.
Possibly. We've got so many different
sections,
versions of this. It's, but preventive maintenance would be fine, yes. Preventive maintenance and
Yeah,
repair.
you did have preventative.
Okay, yeah, that's. And the reason for this is that this definition as written here would seemingly allow a owner to replace an entire feature of a building without a COA application. We don't want that.
So, I can't read this one.
Another?
And now that I'm remembering, I am pretty sure that that is included in Jeff and Rachel's.
I don't, I'm
Revision.
fine.
I
Okay.
think we just need one.
Just one?
Yeah, just for yourself.
Are Jeff and Rachel's with us?
So should I stop sharing my screen? Is this?
No, I'm looking at your screen, Jeff. This is
Yeah,
how-
we have it. Oh, well, that was better. But now we have a copy, so.
Okay. I still don't have it, Jeff.
That's funny. Lori got it. I didn't get it yet either.
I only sent it to Lori. Would everybody like it in their email? I thought she was just gonna make Rachel, I guess I.
Oh, we
just-
have paper copies. I think.
We have
She's
paper
still bringing more
now.
in.
Sounds like Rachel needs it. Thanks, Ed.
And you,
So we simply need to amend the language of Jeff's draft here. Correct?
I see that Jeff continues to use the word in kind.
I have dropped that after Les's comment just a second ago. So I've
That's
got maintenance or repair of features.
That's why I think it'll be helpful if you keep your screen up, Jeff.
Yeah. No, it certainly would be. Is the remainder of that satisfactory to everybody then after?
It is to me now. Jeff, did you have a question with regard to this or?
with the dra-
I just wanted to make sure that what I had was capturing what the commission and what council intended. The maintenance or repair of features was the terminology that we are going with then.
Preventive maintenance, I believe, is the suggestion.
Preventive was added. I don't know if you could hear us.
Okay. Is everyone okay with Jeff's definition with the changes that were just mentioned?
Need to get rid of in kind in a later time. It goes up again. Finding that such repair.
Right.
Yeah,
Two occurrences of in-kind replacement.
right. Okay, so are we good with the definition of ordinary maintenance, or does it need something added or removed at this point? I'm okay with the definition of ordinary maintenance.
I am too, Mr. President.
2 down, 24 to go.
I'm
you go.
I'm in favor.
Okay. Is there anyone that does not like the definition of ordinary maintenance? Okay. Which definition would we like to address next? Or should we just go down the list?
Alphabetical seems
All right,
reasonable.
here we go. I'm using this one. And then as we get to one that he has a question about, we can refer to his document.
Okay.
Okay. So applicant, is there any problem with applicant?
Well, again, Mr. President, depending on what version you're going from,
Sweet Jesus, I will continue to be going from the document dated 2/5/21.
well, the reason I bring it up is not to be a pain. I have plenty of other opportunities for that. It's just that with the work that Jeff's put in and that we have Jeff's definitions in front of us, it might be more efficient to go through the definitions that Jeff came up with and we just got in front of us, as opposed to referring back and forth.
Well,
It's kind of keeping in the
if-
spirit of what you're trying to do.
If we are going to, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, are we going to substitute Jeff's definitions eventually? That's what I need to know.
I myself think that would be prudent. Otherwise, for example, B, applicant, there was a change from applies to has applied. And I don't know as if that's a good use of our time. Whereas if we've got Jeff's in front of us, we can just go from that. But that's a very prudent question.
Because if we're going to eventually adopt Jeff's definitions, then we'll work off Jeff's list and then just replace the definition section with Jeff's list when we're done.
That would be my suggestion.
Everybody agree?
That's a way, that's a method. Let's do it.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, let's just start again at the beginning. Alter or alteration? Is there any question, or does anyone have a concern with this definition?
I have no.
Okay. Just pipe up if I go too fast or don't acknowledge that you're waving your arm or something.
I have it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I need to come up. I would, but it says material change. I say materials change because material change otherwise has a legal significance.
Can I just introduce Will Earhart
Sorry.
of the Planning
Okay.
Commission? He walked in
Hi.
a little later before I could announce his
Yeah.
arrival.
Okay.
So where it says visual, structural, or material change, so I would say materials change or change of materials.
Okay.
Are you still on?
A,
A?
Yeah, I was in alteration.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Okay.
being here, Will.
So materials with an S refers to a substance.
Right.
Material without an S refers to something different. Okay.
Significant.
Okay. So we need to add an S because it actually does mean something. Applicant. What about applicant? Okay. Archaeology.
I just am curious, why is it required?
The
It's
definition.
never, I don't believe the word archaeology appears in the document anywhere else.
It is required based on the certified local government checklist. It has to
Okay.
be included as a definition.
Even though we don't use it ever again.
Correct.
Okay,
We must follow the federal government mandates.
I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay.
Heather, if there are any more of those, can you flag those for us? Because I am not well versed in those requirements. So if there are any other definitions or anything like that, anything of that nature, that is probably not included in here.
Absolutely. That's actually the only thing specifically mentioned in the checklist. As far as definitions go.
All right.
Okay. So archaeology will stay. Architectural features. Are there any suggestions with regard to changing anything that we have in front of us here?
Jeff, why did you highlight it?
Yeah, why is that highlighted?
Again, that just seems like something that are we comfortable with that definition of architectural feature? If nobody sees any issue with it, if it's not overly vague and that is what we intend to be regulating, then I will unhighlight it.
Anybody?
I'm fine with it, but we
Okay.
should probably add a definition so people understand what cornices mean.
Nick?
What is he talking about?
Cornices are those things.
There's things on the corners.
I think there's a common definition.
It's in the Webster's.
It's
Auxiliary,
an ornamental molding around the wall of a room.
Oh, of course.
auxiliary accessory structure. Certificate of appropriateness.
So I guess this brings up another large item that I'd like to discuss while we're
All right.
here at the outset. We are in fact regulating contributing or not. So the classes of property that I have included in this document, which the HPC has given me the thumbs up on, are contributing and non-contributing property. I have gotten rid of the term listed property, which I believe was just a term to describe contributing and non-contributing property.
Wait, Jeff, you didn't get rid of listed property. You got rid of contributing.
I switched it all over, so it's all contributing or non-contributing now.
Oh. Okay, keep going.
It's
I'm
been a
looking
busy
at
day.
Earlier version. Okay.
Yeah, Les, you're either going to have to move to this seat over here
I'm sorry.
or just
Yeah.
get up whenever you want to.
The problem with doing that is that contributing properties are defined in the document as applying only to historic districts. And we want certificates of appropriateness to apply to individual listed properties as well as properties within historic districts. That's why I think it's important that listed properties be there, but listed properties by definition don't include non-contributing properties, which is why originally there was a reference to non-contributing properties in historic districts as well as the listed properties.
Right. So what I have here is any asset, building, structure, site, property, landmark, object, or resource which has been identified and designated as such by the commission under this code. So that does not limit it to historic districts. Is that, maybe this needs change then.
Well, so you think a single property, a single designated property that is not part of a historic district falls under this new definition of a contributing property?
That was the way that I understood it.
Yeah, okay.
Les, do you agree?
Okay, so
Can I speak real quick? I'm
Yes.
only coming from sitting at lots and lots of HPC meetings. So listed property was created as an overall terminology to include any property that has been designated. We were finding out we had local landmark, local historic district, individual listed property. I mean, it got so long that we used listed property to encompass anything designated. And then that's where we also included the historic overlay zoning district, just to be clear that if you are listed, you have your HOZ level or zoning over that. So I think I'm getting more confused the more I read this, because this is the first time I'm seeing this. So again, just sitting at all these meetings, I wanted to be clear as to what I thought sitting there and making some of these edits. Contributing property and non-contributing property, they also can be listed properties. That was part of the goal too. So it's kind of like taking all those classifications, making it cleaner with the rest of the document is why we did that. So we weren't constantly using this very long phrase during the whole rest of that section. Does that make sense? I know it's really complex, but we tried to use listed property in reference to anything that had been locally designated.
So we want to define a I'm confused on the non-contributing property, because in the first version of this, or the 5 February version that we started with, there was a definition of non-contributing property. And now there's a very abbreviated one in this version. But it's a circular definition, anything that's not a contributing property. Anyway, I guess rather than, maybe this is a situation where we need to really understand as a group what these definitions are and what they mean, and not focus on the words on the paper at the moment. But figure out what it is we're trying to say. We can get the words right secondarily. I do not understand what a non-contributing property is and why we care about them.
I would say
And I do understand, I thought I understood based on the first definition where, it doesn't have any historical features.
well, it
Okay.
could.
Okay,
W,
but
Yeah.
addressing just that point first, but if it's part of a historic district, we don't want it to get any worse than it presently is. That's the whole point of regulating non-contributing properties in a district. We recognize that they're different. Maybe we even need to add some language later that makes it a little clearer how they will be treated in terms of the COAs, but simply to ignore them would be to allow a property that's non-contributing within a historic district to become anything.
Can we take a
So-
step back? I think what Greg's asking is the basic difference, and I think Chris would do a great job, given that's her profession as an architect in historic preservation, to explain really contributing versus non-contributing. Again, I'm not trying to speak for you all. I just thought as an education perspective, she would be great
no,
to answer this.
it's very important that we all not only understand what they are, but then agree to how we're going to codify these definitions. There's two issues here. What are they and how do we codify?
So from a, like Heather said, just to kind of take a step back, when we look at creating a district, from a historic preservation perspective, we'll look at it. We'll look for themes or stories or events that occurred that kind of tie that district together. So as we're creating that boundary, we'll look at what specifically makes that boundary. We, not necessarily HPC, but we being like historic preservation professionals, we'll look at it as a, the boundary and what kind of brought that historical significance to that area.
Would
So,
that be like Boomtown?
right, exactly. So yeah, Boomtown, it's on the National Registry of Historic Places. It tells a story of why these buildings were built when they were and what features contributed to their significance. There are buildings within that boundary that don't necessarily meet that historical significance, but they're still a part of that neighborhood. And so they still need to be considerate of the historic nature as a whole, even though those buildings themselves may not be within the period of significance, or they may not be contributing to that historical story.
So if you would take Boomtown as an example,
Mhm.
could you identify something that would be non-conforming, one that we think you could show us in our mind?
Yeah, I can't, I don't remember the exact boundary lines, but I'll just say for the sake, that it covers both sides of West Worcester. The Huntington Bank, right, it doesn't contribute to the historical theme of that neighborhood, but
Huntington
it's,
Bank,
yes,
the newer one.
the new, yeah. But it's still a fixture in the neighborhood, and it's still something that neighborhood, wants to be sensitive to the rest of the neighborhood.
So Chris, using that example, Huntington Bank is a non-contributing property.
Right.
Is the HPC, would they like for Huntington Bank to apply for a COA when they are doing anything other than ordinary maintenance? Is that the intent of the commission?
Yes, that's the intent.
Okay.
What would
But-
something, give us an example that would be a no from the commission? Like, would they not do? Add another story? They could add another story.
That would be something that we would consider. They propose to do that.
Right, that is something we would want to consider. I can't think of an exact situation of something that we would just outright say no. But
If they wanted to remove the images of the wolves.
Oh, but we're not.
Oh, this is the little, yeah, yeah.
In talking with the State Historic Preservation Office, it's about not making things worse. So if you can kind of freeze it, what it is today, it's more focused on when someone were to demolition a building, you'd want it to build new and carry some of the features of that era. That's really about, it's not making things worse.
Well,
Right.
yeah, that's true. But, if we get a property that happens to be caught up in a district, a property that from outward appearances, it's nothing but a vinyl wrapped house with a shingle roof. Whether it had historical features at one time, they're long gone. Maybe they never did. Maybe it was a house built in 1870 that never had features and now has been redone, looks great, but has no historical features. The owner of that home is all of a sudden caught up in this and now has to maintain their house according to historical preservation rules, even though the home never had any historical significance. I mean, I always want to make sure I'm clear here.
So the standards are different for a non-contributing property. So if it is non-contributing, it's not like we're going to require them to.
Well, in this document,
remove
the standards are
vinyl.
not any different. In this original document, it says we're going to treat them both the same way.
I'm sorry, I meant the
Yeah, that's not.
Secretary of Interior standards.
Right. For example, if they had vinyl siding now, they're not going to come back and say, you've got to do wood siding now because the neighbor has
Well-
wood siding. That's not how it operates.
I'm just pointing a disconnect between what you're telling me and what the document says.
And this is the perfect time to fix that.
Exactly.
Greg,
Right.
where in the document are you pointing to?
I'm
I mean,
referring-
I tried to address that in the new COA section, so 158.07. There had been other places where I can give you the exact subsection.
The historic district may contain, properties, but both types of properties are subject to regulation as defined in this chapter. That sentence is in the 5 February document.
Oh, so in the definitional section?
That's in original item K.
So the way I understood the intent of the HPC is that non-contributing properties were subject to the COA requirement, but that the HPC had the discretion to relax or waive the COA requirement for non-contributing properties. Non-contributing properties are subject to the minimum maintenance requirement, and non-contributing properties are subject to the landscaping requirement. Can I get a head nod? Is that an accurate understanding of the HPC intent?
Could you read it again, please?
Yeah, so my understanding, I'm just trying to summarize. The non-contributing properties are subject to this COA requirement, but the HPC has the discretion to relax or waive the COA requirement.
I'm
Correct.
saying yes. That's exactly how it is.
Okay, that's how I think it reads. It reads that the non-contributing properties are subject to the minimum maintenance requirement. Is that the intent?
Yes.
Okay, and that non-contributing properties are subject to the landscaping requirement.
Correct.
Okay. So that was my understanding. My question mark with non-contributing properties is just how exactly they're designated. So in Jeff's definition of non-contributing property right now, it seems to me that in a historic district, there are contributing properties and there are non-contributing properties, and that's it. Nothing else can exist. And you designate a contributing property and everything else is a non-contributing property. Is that the intent of the HPC? Is that how things are supposed to work? Or are there other properties in a historic district that are neither contributing nor non-contributing?
So let's rewind again with education.
Okay,
So let me give you an example. When Boomtown was done in the 80s, a building inventory had to happen first. And as part of that application, you have to list pretty much every address and whether it's contributing versus non-contributing, then a description of the architecture of that structure. Yeah, I sound like I know what I'm doing, but I'm happy to give that application to anybody, but that's part of that process. So it does have to be contributing versus the non-contributing, and that's how they're listed on the actual registrar application. And that's why building inventories are a really important part of the HPC's job, is again, capture the contributing versus non-contributing.
And Chris, did you say that the standards would be different for non-contributing properties? I mean, is the standards, do they differentiate between these two types?
Right, so the Secretary of Interior standards are, they're, I mean, there's a whole slew of, yeah, but it is, what's required of, for, preservation of certain buildings is different based on the building, so I can't.
So Heather's example of not expecting wood on a,
Right, if it's
On a
already
vinyl
vinyl
siding
siding,
house.
it's non-contributing, we wouldn't say you've got to do wood like your neighbor.
what would be something that would be not prohibited or not allowed on a non-contributing?
It's so hard to answer these what if scenarios because
Yeah.
there's so many different scenarios without having an example. I think makes it really hard. And like I said, Chris works in this every day, so I lean on her for an example.
And I can't really think of a scenario of something.
Well,
Specific, but-
again, now I'm misunderstanding. I thought we were moving down the road of only requiring non-contributing property to meet some maintenance standard that we've got to make sure we define properly, and landscaping standard that currently is not defined either, but I'm sure we can do that. But
And I don't know,
if the rest of the COA process and is going to apply to non-contributing properties, then what the heck is the difference between them anymore? Other than a label, if they're going to be treated exactly the same way. So I'm confused. On one hand, we're saying we're not treating them the same way, but it sounds like, Heather, you're saying, yes, we are treating them the same way.
That's not what I mean. They still fall under needing a COA, but I can't look at that and say there's no design features left or architectural features, so they don't have to do anything different as far as that. Or let's say they want to remove a porch that does still have some historical features to it. That would be different. Again, it just depends on what that structure is like.
Except that we originally defined a non-contributing property as having none of those features. I mean, see, there's where I'm struggling, because you got words here that say we accept that a non-contributing property doesn't have any of these historical features. It's lost. Let me go back to the words that you guys put down. Loss of architectural features that either did not have those qualities from the beginning or if built in the same time period because it does not relate to the documented significance of the district due to alterations, loss of architectural features, disturbances, and no longer possesses historic integrity. So if that's the starting point, there's nothing to go back to. you know, there's no feature to recreate or to maintain because it doesn't have any, if that's our definition.
I think the definition, which would come from the Secretary of the Interior standards, don't say that there is no single feature somewhere in a non-contributing property that might be historic. It's the whole, the substance. If the substance, I don't remember the language, but if the substance of the property has lost historic value or never had any, then it would be non-contributing. That doesn't mean that there might not be a porch, let's say, or a set of steps that has some kind of historical significance. Just not enough for that property to be designated a contributing property. And I, you know, for what it's worth, I think that porch steps might be an example of the importance of having the HPC able to look at proposals for change. Let's say that there is a non-contributing property in a historic district that has a set of porch steps that are you know, sort of traditional. And the owner says, hey, I have to replace them. They're falling apart. You know, he or she doesn't have to replace them, but they choose to do so. And they say, I'm just going to use treated lumber. No enclosures, just risers and pieces of treated lumber. That is something the HPC would want to argue is not appropriate in a historic district. Okay, we probably could do a better job of defining non-contributing properties than we have.
Well,
But I
if you're
think
going to
it's-
refer to a definition that already exists in a federal document, then perhaps you don't have to define it. You can just refer to that definition. But I think there is confusion. If you establish a definition, then is it or is it not superseded by some other definition? I just think, again, all I'm getting here is going after is clarity here. What do we mean and what are we saying? And how do we say what we mean? And that's all I'm getting at.
So I have a quick question. Heather, when you stress the importance of the inventory, that's where the initial determination of contributing versus non-contributing will be made. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
And that is something that the commission will be doing on an ongoing basis, kind of inventorying properties in town. And then when we get to the actual designation stage, then the commission will follow 158.07. And then they're designating based on specific criteria as contributing. Is that right? Or as listed? I mean, I guess this is why, this is a definitional thing. Jeff has gotten rid of listed. I mean, what is different? So if they have an inventory and then we are following 158.07 to designate a property on our local register, then how do we use that inventory during the designation process? Do we need to? I mean,
Yeah, I think we need to, absolutely, because you could have, a whole block that's non-contributing. And I hate to say it, but at that point, it's probably not worth it. But if you have 2 out of 20 properties that are non-contributing, then it's still worth going after, I believe, that block that may have 2 non-contributing properties. Like Boomtown, like I said, Boomtown has several that are non-contributing, but obviously there was enough there to create a very substantial district. It's pretty large. It doesn't have clean boundaries, but it's a pretty large district.
Okay, so we were talking about the certificate of appropriateness that sparked all this conversation about what is contributing and what is non-contributing, and whether or not the word listed should be used or not.
And my understanding, Mr. President, is that instead of every place in here saying contributing and non-contributing properties, they decided to say, we're going to define listed property as either being a contributing or a non-contributing property. Is that true, Heather?
Pardon, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. The rationale for the term listed property is solely because it saves space and time to say listed property, then it's defined to be contributing and non-contributing properties. Okay.
Or district or object or et cetera.
Okay. Well, I'm thoroughly lost, but
Then you're in the right
Well, you
place.
spent like 2 months in the night. I don't-
good. So, I mean, I don't have a problem with listing contributing and non-contributing as opposed to putting listed, because then it creates a whole nother thing.
Well, I think we're kind of at the larger issue, though. Is a certificate of appropriateness going to be necessary for the alteration or the demolition of a contributing property, or in this case, and a non-contributing property? That's a pretty big.
Right. But before we get to that, can we talk about listed?
I just add something.
Go ahead.
My memory has probably slipped here. I think that the way Jeff has defined contributing property down on his H, it includes everything that is listed. And therefore, if he assures us that he has made that substitution everywhere in the document, contributing or listed, then it's okay.
Okay.
But the
That's
only
correct,
thing I
Wes.
But the only, sorry, Jeff, but if we are in our inventory, using contributing property and non-contributing property differently than we're using them here, that seems I then think we keep it as originally conceived with listed property contributing and non-contributing. Jeff, after hearing all this, does your opinion on this change, or do you still like no listed property, just keeping contributing? Because I think if there's an inventory out there that in which contributing means something very different than it does in our ordinance, that seems funny to me. Or no, you still like contributing property and getting rid of listed property?
I mean, without looking at the standards that they are going to be applying, I guess I'm not comfortable saying one way or the other. The way this is written, and this would have been the next issue. Historic structure, historic object, historic site, historic, historic resource, historic property, that's all gone. It is contributing property, non-contributing property, historic zone, historic overlay zone, and property. They're not, all of these definitions are not in my version. So I know whatever standards they need to adhere to, they should adhere to those standards.
All right. Well, I'm open to suggestions here because I've been lawyered to death at this point.
It would seem to me, Mr. President, we're at a spot where we can move on, because if there are going to be challenges to what we've just tentatively agreed to here, it's only going to rear its head when you get into the meat of the document and the use of the terms. And right now, it seems like we have an understanding, at least, of what we think we want to say. For example, my concern about non-contributing property is really only going to be relevant in how it's used and how it's applied and how we treat those properties. And that isn't happening in the definition section. So I'm content to continue to move on down the list.
Okay. All right. Commission. Is it okay if commission means Historic Preservation Commission? Okay. Let's contributing properties. Well, this shouldn't be problematic at all. Does this definition seem sufficient to describe what a contributing property is? I'm inclined to think it's okay.
Chris, do you think it is? since you're the working architect?
I would just, I'm fine with the definition of contributing property. I just worry what the intention then of the non-contributing property definition would be, because as Jeff, and this, I think is his latest, he notes that it's subject to jurisdiction of the commission pursuant to this code. That language is not noted in the non-contributing, but the intention would be that both contributing and non-contributing properties within the district would be applying for a COA per the ordinance. I don't know if that
Okay.
was more confusing, but
So both are subject to the jurisdiction of the commission, so maybe just deleting that last part of the definition of contributing property with that. Can you see the part I'm highlighting?
yes, I can. Yeah. Yes.
Delete that.
Sure. If that,
I mean, if we're going to define how these terms apply and what we're doing with these properties throughout this document, it would seem to be unnecessary to me. We're going to specify how the property's treated. That's the whole
Right.
purpose of the code.
Right.
So it's unnecessary.
In other words, to
in the
say,
definitions.
that it's subject to the code when that's the whole purpose of the code, and
Right.
seems redundant to me, but.
Mhm.
Okay,
Just
so
before you- Okay, well, we can never-
Got another opinion?
Come on, Will.
ah,
I have a suggestion,
okay.
which is that we ask for clarity from the HPC on, this gets into the substance, 15806, and just the distinction between a contributing property and a historic district. Because it's the same criteria, but they do seem like fundamentally different things, or at least they should be. So I'm missing that distinction, and I think understanding that would lead into how we define everything. Otherwise, in this definition, to Greg's point, I'd suggest you at the very least refer to 15806 as to what a contributing property is. So I'd be interested in just understanding a little more what if there is a difference between identifying a contributing property or historic district. Historic district seems like it's made up of some critical mass of contributing properties. So just kind of what that process.
Anyone have an answer to that?
really, I think maybe the best way to describe it, I think Les kind of touched on this already, but we have two options here to locally designate. We can do a whole district, which is, I think we defined it as 2 or more properties, or so within that district would be contributing and non-contributing properties, could be non-contributing properties there. The other option is an individually listed property. That wouldn't necessarily be within a district. So if we're defining contributing as both a contributing within the district and an individual that's, individually contributing, I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does. I think look at the definition of historic district, that's the same, just so I think that's a different term.
We can't hear well.
I was just saying that the definition of historic district also just refers back to the commission. And then we have the same designation criteria. So maybe no one else thinks this is a problem. I just think this would really help clean up the document if we understood a little bit more about that distinction.
Okay, well, for now, let's move ahead. Under contributing properties definition, did we decide to remove the last part of the definition?
The part from and on.
So where it says has been identified, period. That and?
Oh.
No, I think the
no.
suggestion was as such by the commission under this code, period.
Okay,
Right.
So it's written right now.
okay.
So basically, just to read what everyone's agreed to, contributing property means any asset, building, structure, site, property, landmark, object, or resource which has been identified and designated as such by the commission under this code. So that means that a contributing property is whatever the commission decides to label a contributing property as.
Based on the criteria established in this law.
Right. Okay, demolish or demolition. We good on that one? Downtown? Historic district, I've heard this come up a couple times. Is there something we need to change here? Anyone have a suggestion on that, or are we okay with moving ahead on this for now?
Mr. President, historic district, there was a distinction made between a historic district, which is 2 or more properties, and an individual listed property. In the definition of historic district, it doesn't specify that it would not include just one property.
There is though in another section here, a procedure and criteria used to establish a historic district though, correct?
Yeah, the problem I'm having with this, and it might be just the way that I look at things, you know, being a computer programmer and looking at stuff in a certain structure, is, to me, if you have a definition that's referring to a section, and in the section it's referring to the definition, I would, the way that I process things, it would be more like you have the definition set, and once the definitions are set, when you're explaining what the main body of the ordinance is, it refers back to the definitions. And so it could just be the way that I'm processing it.
So do you want to add under historic district some language that says containing at least 2 properties or something like that?
I think it might help with clarity. And also, since a historic district can be comprised of contributing and non-contributing, to have it defined where that's part of it, it might help structure it a little bit. Now, could we have a historic district that is comprised solely and exclusively with non-conforming?
Well,
Technically, I don't know why we would, but technically, can we?
probably technically, but it seems kind of silly.
Do we want to have that capability?
I'm seeing head shaking. Why would we do that, Bill?
Well, my point is that that's part of this whole thing here is if we're defining it as a historic district and we're being silent on whether it would have almost that all of the properties in the historic district would be non-conforming, then is it a historic district? And if we want to say that, no, it's not a historic district if it's completely non-conforming, then we would put that in the definition. If it's silent on that, then unless we have something within the body of this, it's a possibility. So again, just trying to sort out the terms. Part of the reason you have definitions is to make things clearer. And so, all right, what's a listed property if we still go with that term? It's just conforming and non-conforming within a historic district. Okay, fine. What about individual listed? If it's individual listed, is that basically a historic district, but only with one? And so that's, you know.
Well, what if we
No.
added language to the end of this that said containing at least 2 conforming properties?
Or containing at least
Well,
2 properties
Contributing.
contributing. Well, It can have, if you have a historic district with one contributing and one non-contributing is a historic district.
No.
it-
Not if
think-
we
I
say
think-
two contributing properties.
That's my point.
Do you envision, does the HPC even envision as a goal, a district that has fewer than 2 historic properties in it? I'm seeing
Okay.
head shaking no in the
Then I'm-
negative
then
across the
I'm-
board. So
I'm cool
we
with
can
that.
fairly define a district as having 2 conforming properties,
That's good with me.
or contributing properties, excuse me, and that should solve that.
Yep,
So we can
I'm
just-
fine if that's what we say, because we take care of that potential
I
ambiguity.
mean, that was the original language anyway, except for the lack of the specificity of contributing property.
Well, that's the point.
We're just adding to the
I feel a
end.
little need to defend myself here. I mean, my personal preference would be to do something like what Bill is suggesting. That's what we had originally, the definition of historic district. But I was convinced by Jeff that a more legal way of doing it is this way. And I think that since this definition is included elsewhere in the document, right, Jeff? Somewhere in the operational part of it, that it's the same in the end.
So my thinking here was that we very
about this.
clearly define the procedure and criteria for establishing a historic district. We can list that again here if that would put everybody's mind at ease, but you can't create a historic district without following the procedures established later in the law, which, I mean, continuity, I mean, there are a variety, I think they list maybe 7 or 8 different criteria, and we've said you need to match at least 2 of those. I don't know what section that is. I don't want to lose my place here, but
Yeah, I remember that, Jeff.
we can
No, if.
re-add that in back here, but that was my justification for omitting it here is because it is restated later.
Well, that's a valid way of going about it. If the end of this document, there is no way that you can have a historic district with 2 and only 2 properties, which are both non-conforming, then I'm okay with that. I was just thinking for clarity's sake. So there's the operational definition and a definition that adds clarity. And both approaches are fine. I was kind of opting more toward the clarity, but that's okay.
So we don't need to add that.
Nope.
Okay. Historic significance. Are we okay with the definition of historic significance? Historic overlay zone. Okay. Landscaping.
Hmm.
Ding, ding. Let's go. What are the suggestions on how to fix or better understand landscaping?
Standards, my question is, what standards are we using? Does the HPC envision using?
Will may be the one to answer this, but Jeff has included here some new language that we proposed. And it relates to the section later, the operational section later, which defines what appropriate landscaping is. Here, just definitional.
Do we get to the appropriate?
So this definition as adjusted is okay for the definition section.
Well, I wonder, right? So we're only talking in terms of a contributing property here. If the intent is to regulate landscaping on a non-contributing property too, I would either add non-contributing property here or get rid of.
Well, no, I see the point. I mean, I'm looking back now. I just jumped ahead, and I know we'll get to it at some point. But in the in 158.08, in the redrafted version, Rachel, your version,
Yeah.
Yeah, item E, where it says, in historic districts, it is expected that all properties must maintain appropriate landscaping. This is also expected of individual property. Anyway, okay. But therein lies my challenge, my question is, what is appropriate landscaping? And therefore, my original question, what are the standards? So I'm okay with the definition if at some point in this document, we establish a standard. But what I'm suggesting is when we get there, and this is just a read ahead, we can wait till we get there. We haven't yet defined that standard. And I
Right.
think before I am going to be comfortable with landscaping, we're going to have to do that in some manner.
Mike Marsh suggested that it be decided by the city administrator, I think.
Well, again, I'm not suggesting we jump ahead and discuss it. I'm saying
Okay.
that I'm okay with the definition as long as, with the understanding that we'll necessarily get to it because it's addressed in
And
the
as,
later portion.
as far as this definition of landscaping goes, my understanding is that it's the landscaping of all properties. So perhaps it should be changed to say front and or sides of properties, or take contributing out. Because that implies it's only contributing properties, but it's contributing and non-contributing, correct?
And if our intent with definition of landscaping is to define landscaping and leave the applicability and the standards and where it's applied to the body of the rest of it, then we don't need it here. So I'm my way of concurring that we just say both sides of a property. And take contributing out because that'll be the substance of
Okay,
discussion later.
all right. And then listed property, did we leave listed in or take listed out?
I thought we eliminated the need for the word listed in the
Okay.
document.
All
Wasn't that
right.
I thought that was.
I don't
just-
know. You need to be really careful because you're dealing with properties that are designated. You're not going around the city saying, okay, this is historic, you gotta have landscaping. So I think that's why, again, that's why we use a listed property, to be very clear that it's locally designated.
Well, the-
That's the point of that word terminology.
We can leave the definition in. I mean, if it ends up not being used, I don't know that that's a.
Yeah,
that's
is it
not-
doing
no
any harm? Yeah.
But if we need it,
If the definition of listed property is a short way of saying contributing and non-contributing properties, then we have a choice. We can put that in as the definition or just simply take it out. And everywhere where we may have said listed property, we just say contributing and non-contributing.
well, listed has its own meaning. I mean, that's something that's been recommended and designated.
Mhm. I
So
think
what's
we
the
have to leave it in.
recommendation?
I think it has to stay in.
We're leaving listed in.
Well, Jeff, do you want to respond to that? Because it seemed like in your most recent document, you're trying to do something different. And I'm not sure I'm really clear on it. So
So if you go down to the next line, local register means the register of contributing property, non-contributing property, and historic districts. It would be the substitution for listed property in what I sent you guys.
Ah.
And I don't know, I mean, no property within. Heather, I understand what you're saying, and it sounds like what we are describing, what I am describing and what you are describing are just the same thing worded differently. I use contributing property in the way that a contributing property in my mind is a property that has been designated in a historic district or, on its own, in a historic overlay zone, I believe would be the way it'd be termed in here, that has been designated by the commission as a property of historic significance.
but that's not how Heather's using listed property. She's using listed property to contain both contributing, her original definition of contributing and not contributing.
Someone tell
but
me
if it-
what we want to put here.
But if it makes I mean, I see.
Tell me.
Jeff's point is that if it makes the local register, that's the way we distinguish properties between. I mean, if it's on the register, the council's approved the recommendation and there we have it. It's in a district. It's on the register. I see the distinction. So it would seem that what Jeff's saying is listed and local registered properties seem to be synonymous.
So which one do we want to keep? Or do we want both?
Well, we got a proposal before us, and that's adopt local register.
Is everybody okay with that? Changing listed property to local register?
If it doesn't make a huge,
Heather,
Kind
does
of
it make
looking
a
at Heather
huge
to see
difference?
what-
Honestly, I just got this tonight, so I haven't read it.
Okay.
So I
Yeah.
feel like a little
Look,
bit like a fire hose going on.
It's like anything else. We get to the end of this whole review process and we find out that we erred and we need to
Right.
redefine it. We can
Yeah.
do that.
There'll be a chance to review it before we vote on it. So, all right, for now, we'll have local register. Mayor, member, non-contributing property. Are we okay with the definition after all the talk of,
we're talking about Jeff's definition
Yes.
and take out in kind.
Hmm?
In kind is still in Jeff's definition.
We're on non-contributing property.
Oh,
Oh,
excuse me, I went down to ordinary property. Excuse me. I missed
so are
one.
we okay with non-conforming property? All right, now we've handled ordinary maintenance, correct?
That's already been amended.
Okay. Owner? Property or properties? Property or properties of historic significance? Streetscape? Street furniture? Utilities? Verbal boundary description? View corridor? Okay. That's the definitions. Yeah, that's very exciting. Okay. Brings us to 15804. What recommendations do we have for 15804?
Mr. President,
Yes.
for 158.04A, says the commission will consist of 5 members appointed by the mayor, subject to confirmation by a majority of the members of council. I think that instead of 5 members, it should be 7. And so that's one aspect of this. Another is, and I guess I would get to this shortly thereafter, but I'll give a sneak peek. And that is, I think that it would be prudent to have, as one of those 7 members of the commission, a representative from the planning commission who is not the representative of the zoning board of appeals, and that person would be chosen by the planning commission. I really like Jeff's idea of having at least one of the commission members be someone with a law background. And then as a matter of discussion, at least think about whether one of the members of the commission should be a city council member. I'm not as wedded to that, but that it would be 7 members and at least one being having a legal background and having at least one be from the planning commission who's not the ZBA representative. Those, I think, are substantive and important changes.
Okay, so there's a recommendation to have it be 7 instead of 5.
I'd
Let's-
like to know why 5 was chosen originally, though.
Yeah, I'm gonna let, I think HPC speak to that, but I just wanted to, just a couple general oversight or general observations. I'm finding that it's difficult to, honestly, it's difficult to find citizens to serve on all boards and commissions. I'm finding it's a real challenge. There is currently an opening on this commission that I've been trying to fill for a matter of months. I've swung and missed on three different individuals, and I'm still searching. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to add to boards and commissions. It's a challenge to find people. Secondarily, if you are going to add, I think there needs to be some specific guidance for what area they should represent. And I think that flexibility in terms of that area of representation is important. We have kind of a broad view. A lot of these things we like to have representative of all wards, and that's always appropriate. But just as it gets into creating more specific requirements, that even limits the potential candidate pool even more. I have the same concern about specifying somebody with a specific professional background. Really limits the candidate pool. Finally, my last observation is about including a sitting city council member on a board of commission such as this. With all due respect, I think that is potentially problematic, because I've seen instances where sitting city council members have interacted with boards or commissions, and frankly, there have been times I've seen where that person's involvement kind of takes over. It takes a little bit of the room or air out of the room and makes it, I've seen where members of a board or commission feel, because now there's an elected official there, that they step aside and they cede their responsibility. Just an observation that I hope you'll consider.
Mr. President?
Yeah, Bill.
Concerning the difficulty at times of filling spots, I've seen that, that's a very real problem. If we have 5 members and there's a vacancy, then that's 4. That's not good. If we have 7 members and there's 1 or 2 vacancies, we still have at least 5. And certainly the point the mayor made about being careful about specifying the desired mix. If we increase the number of members from 5 to 7, that makes it actually a little bit easier if, in terms of finding somebody that meets some of these various categories. And then also, I think the mayor's point about council, like I said, I'm not real wedded to that, especially since some of this stuff will come before council. And that's the main reason I didn't think it would be appropriate to have someone from Zoning Board of Appeals, because there could be an appeal. So with that in mind, I still think that these 7 members, although there may be at times 1 or 2 vacancies, that still brings us to 5. And a member of the Planning Commission and somebody with a legal background. I know that's kind of general, but in terms of, legal background specific to what legal area, I don't think that necessarily matters. And if we do get too rigid with the specificity, then it would make it more difficult to fill. And obviously we could have someone who was on the East Side resident that also was a legal person. It's not like there's a slot for legal.
I understand. I got it, Bill. I got it. Okay, so I too was inclined to increase the number to 7. I am taken back a little bit by the concern of the mayor to be able to find people. So I guess we'll take this in a couple different chunks. First one being, should we expand the membership of the Historic Preservation Commission to 7 people? Is there any other comment on that?
I would prefer the wording that it must have at least 5 and no more than 7 people. Because there are, I agree, it's very difficult to get people to volunteer their evenings and weekends to work on things like this. And this is going to be a commission that's going to be very busy. Of most importance to me is that we have people who understand historic homes, historic districts. And I think it's the 4 we have are quality all the way. So I'm more concerned with quality of knowledge of historic districts. And I don't think we should designate as high as 7. I think it should consist of no more than 7 and no less than 5.
Mr. President, with respect to that, if it's no less than 5. We do not have a functional Historic Preservation Commission right now because there are 4 members. So
That's
in
true.
terms
We
of
don't have
wording,
one right now. That,
uh,
that shows you the necessity to keep the number low.
No, what that shows is that if we adopted your wording, they wouldn't be able to function because there's only 4 of them now. You said between 5 and 7. And if we keep it at 7 and there's a vacancy or 2, then we have what we have now. So the idea of the functionality of saying 7 still accomplishes what I believe Sandy's intent is.
Okay.
Mr.
so-
President,
Go ahead.
I personally am willing to defer to the mayor's recommendation at this time. I would suggest, however, that our very energetic and capable current commission, if they come back to us, in a year and say, look, we've got other folks interested, would you please reconsider expanding the size of our commission? We can address it at that time. But with the struggles to even get to the 5 we got now, I don't see a need to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. I agree. When I read the recommendation, I thought it's real hard to get people to do this. And it goes before council and planning commission eventually anyway, anything of any substance. So I agree with Greg that we should wait at best.
Thanks, John. I appreciate that. I would be fine, I think, with language that allowed for an expansion, a voluntary expansion past the current limitation of 5. Sandy's words, made some sense to me to creating the possibility to expand up to a set number. I just would not necessarily be comfortable with the requirement to do so.
Well, then why don't we,
Mr. President, one last point, and that is the function of the Historic Preservation Commission up to this point is different than the function of the Historic Preservation Commission once this ordinance is adopted. And so to assume that the types of endeavors that is taken to fill that would continue into the future, I don't think that is necessarily a valid assumption because the duties will substantially change. Instead of putting together and laboring hours and hours putting together a document, this is going to be operationalizing and carrying through with the document. And so if we say, mix with what Sandy has said and what the mayor has said, if we have it at 7 members and we have 5, okay. If we have 7 members and we have 6, okay. It's an attempt to fill the spots. And if we fill them, great. If we don't, then we have what we have now. So it's operationally, it to me would be equivalent.
Mr. President.
can we make a suggestion for, that the membership be up to 7 members?
Mr. President, I'll just make a motion that we adopt the appropriate language that keeps the membership at 5 with the opportunity to go to 7, and we'll defer to Mr. Marsh on the way to legally describe that. But that conceptually, the motion is keep it at 5, as the mayor suggested, with the opportunity to move it to 7 at the mayor's discretion. And Mr. Marsh will figure out how to write that. We don't have to do that.
Mr. President, so what do we do with the 7-member commission that only has 6 members? Like similar to the 4-member commission we have now? What happens in the event of a tie or?
Well, they're just going to have to duke it out so there isn't a tie.
Or it doesn't pass if there's a tie, just like it is normally, just like it was here. Just like that's the way it works, is if you have a tie, then it doesn't pass.
We can define voting results or criteria as part of this document.
All right.
The answer is we define it.
Here's where we're at. So do we leave it as it is at 5, or do we suggest some language changing it to up to 7? What's the general consensus?
I'd like to hear from John. He's had his hand up a while.
Briefly, speaking for the commission, the Historic Commission, I think Sandy's suggestion, I think we would be very happy with 5 and no more than 7. We've been fine with 5 up to this point. I could see that things will get rather busy down the road, and there may be a definite need for having an additional members. As far as the attorney, it would have been great if we had an attorney up to this point. But I don't know how important that will be for the future. That will be up to you to decide. Thank you.
All right. You know, at this point, I'm just inclined to just leave it at 5 for now.
I'm inclined to have a vote on Greg's suggestion.
Okay. Greg, could you say that again, and then we'll take a show of hands?
My
You-
motion was simply to leave it at 5 with the appropriate language to allow it to go to 7 at the mayor's discretion.
Okay. And Mike, you can handle that for us? Okay. So who is in favor of, it's at 5, but it can be expanded to 7 at the mayor's discretion? All in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign? Okay. Now, before we get into a lengthy discussion, is there suitable interest in demanding that a lawyer be on?
We have a lawyer, it goes to planning commission for consideration, and then it comes to the council. And we have a lawyer available to us, the city lawyer.
Okay.
Um,
So I'm
So-
not hearing there's overwhelming interest in that. Okay,
The proposal wasn't for a lawyer, but someone with a legal background that does provide more of a pool, if you will.
That was yours. Jeff's got a licensed attorney in his.
Yeah, and I'm the one that spoke. So if Jeff wants to go for that, fine.
okay. Is there interest in putting a codicil in this that we need someone with law background? If so, say now or forever hold your peace.
Now or forever hold your peace.
Okay.
Okay.
So here we go. All in favor of saying there be an attorney, say aye,
Legal background.
or legal background.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed, same sign. Aye.
aye.
Okay. It sounds like we've gone away from the city council member. Is there anyone that believes there should be a member of the planning commission?
That's not the representative to zoning board of appeals. That is my,
Right.
that is my, my motion.
Right.
Well, maybe this is something that, excuse me, Mr. President, maybe this is something we ought to ask the mayor's opinion on too, is adding an additional responsibility to a sitting member. Is that something that would be equally challenging? I don't know. I really, it's a question.
It's a way to get an extra body on there.
It is, but is it asking more of a volunteer that they, someone?
That's my concern. We ask people to volunteer to serve on a specific board or commission. There are a couple of crossovers, as you're all aware. I'm having a little bit of difficulty of creating a legal requirement that happened in this instance.
Yeah.
How many members are on the planning commission?
9.
I think that would not be overwhelming.
Well, you haven't been on the planning commission.
That's right. And you two have.
Okay,
Mark, may I
go
say
ahead.
something on this? I want to make the same point essentially that the mayor made about about having a council member on. I think if there's a member of the planning commission on the Historic Preservation Commission, that person will inevitably see his or her role as being a kind of watchdog, not as a full functioning member of the commission. And what we need, and will need even more in the future, are functioning members of the commission. So I think we're pretty strongly opposed to that idea.
And
And it's
for
very
that-
difficult to
All right.
cast the vote if you're on a planning commission and then you have to vote on it, or on council.
So,
If something comes
I was
up.
just going to add to that, Sandy. When I talked to the State Historic Preservation Office, they said to be very cautious of dual purpose members.
Mhm.
So there already is a purpose with that planning commission member and also ZBA and even
Mhm.
council.
okay,
So he said an option is to have ex officio members or non-voting members, but again, you don't want to overcomplicate things.
all right, to move along. So, the suggestion to have a member of the planning commission, not the representative to the zoning board of appeals, be a member of the Historic Preservation Commission. All in favor, say aye.
Was that motion again, Mark?
It's the one you said.
Aye.
Okay, all opposed, same sign?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that addresses that. Is there anything else in 15804? Okay, 15805. Yeah,
Did you deal with the suggestion that the commission shall contain one member who is an architect as a requirement? That's the way I'm reading that.
I think that, isn't that a requirement?
No.
The state requires
No.
it? No?
is that,
I thought the state required that.
It's a preference to have someone with that profession, but it also lists, various types. But that
Okay.
definitely is one of their suggestions.
Well, I think that's Jeff's, is it not?
Yeah, I think with a board, and my justification for this was with a board with this much authority and influence over the property rights of citizens, I think it's important to have a diverse group of people and not just people. Well, I'll just leave it at that. I think it is important to have people with a diverse offering of expertise and passion for this issue. So that was my.
I agree with that. I feel like Section D covers that. And I would point to the fact that the current 4-member group contains 2 architects. So we're certainly well aware of that. So in the draft that I'm looking at, which I think is Jeff's current, there's still an open, items E and F are still open. I'm not sure that you've dealt with those, and I would think that those should be dealt with. And for the record, I am not in favor of either one of those suggestions for reasons already stated.
I guess the question then to Jeff is, do you still recommend those after this discussion?
I mean, if it's going to be too burdensome to find an architect or somebody with a building trades background, I mean, I see here that it is, we are giving preference to those individuals under D. For the record, I'm also opposed to making the commission larger for the reason the mayor stated. I don't feel strongly about either point. No.
okay, so
We can move
you would
on.
like to withdraw E and F?
Sure. F was the BZA, correct?
Architect.
Okay, right. There was another point in this section though, before we move on to the next one. I believe they put a time limit on appointments made to the commission by the mayor. Did that make it into the version that the February 5th version?
On what you sent me here, it says the mayor shall nominate an individual to fill vacancies on the commission within 60 days of the occurrence of said vacancy.
So I guess it sounds like, are we comfortable keeping that in?
This is how it's part of the CLG checklist.
Okay, well, never mind then.
So there we go. What else do we have with regard to 15804?
So, Mr. President, just to be clear, working from Jeff's version, E, F, and G are not being considered.
Well, I don't know. We haven't gotten to G.
Well, I guess let's take a step back, please, because we didn't start off by saying we were going to look at his version.
True.
We started with our base 5 February document.
And then
addressed-
I'm asking that people that have something in that section chime up
Right.
and
Got it.
point them out. So, so I guess before we leave section 15804, is there anything that somebody wants to add or remove?
The mayor shall, I suggest we officially move, the mayor shall appoint one member of the commission to serve on this PZA. Zoning board of, oh. zoning board
I
of
couldn't be
appeals.
more opposed to that. Because what you've got is you've got the Historic Preservation Commission that will come up with their own decisions. And there is a procedure that an individual property owner for certain situation would appeal to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And so then what you've got is you've got somebody on the Historic Preservation Commission who will also act in the capacity, unless they have to recuse themselves, act in the capacity of passing a judgment on whether to grant a variance to something that they may have voted on.
How about this? I'll just float this for a second. There are two areas where there's a crossover between these two independent bodies. One is here with G, where a member of the Historic Preservation Commission is on the Zoning Board of Appeals. The other involves whether it's a simple majority or a supermajority.
Right.
I'm for both of these bodies being independent of one another. But I think they need to be respectful of one another's decisions also. So I would not be opposed to not having a member on the Zoning Board of Appeals if it would take the supermajority to override a decision of the Historic Preservation Commission, because I think that keeps a better balance. And the difference between a simple and a super is the difference between 4 votes and 5 votes. So that's how I feel about it.
I'd like to ask Mike Marsh how he feels about supermajority. Have
It-
you ever had zoning board of appeals?
Well, it isn't it isn't allowed. It's a simple majority, so there can't be a problem. Our code says that it'll be a simple majority vote.
Yeah, but it wasn't always that way.
But I mean,
That's what she's getting at.
Oh.
This is the guy with the gray hair talking. Yeah, believe it or not, there was a time around here where it took super majority of the Board of Zoning Appeals to override the Planning Commission. Seems like there was another one too, but usually led to some difficulties, to tell you the truth, both in terms of the relationship between the boards and but also when on those occasions when we were challenged and had to go over to Common Police Court, we had multiple judges tell us that that was an unreasonable requirement. Since we went with the majority votes for the Planning Commission and the Board of Zoning Appeals, we have yet to be sued for any of our decisions. It's been years. And I think that that has a lot to do with it because we ran into situations where parties had a majority vote, but not a super majority. And so in theory, they had convinced a majority of a board or a commission of the validity of their argument, and yet they lost anyway. And so Judge Williamson in particular, and I can't think of some of the others, but I know more than once Judge Williamson threw out decisions like that 2 blocks over. So I am really not a fan of supermajority votes. That doesn't mean you should have a member or not a member. I mean, that's up to you. But I think that in almost every decision that all of us come to with boards and commissions, a majority rules. And I think it's probably best, since you asked, nobody elected me, but since you asked, I think it's probably best to stick with that.
Okay, then we will address them separately. Is there anybody that wants to promote G here?
I'd sort of like to speak to it. I think that there would be a real advantage in having a member of the Historic Preservation Commission available to speak as a member of the Board of Zoning Appeals on COA applications, but the person should be non-voting. And so that's a possibility, a non-voting member of,
Well, I mean, it's possible that someone from the Historic Preservation Commission could just come to the meeting on nights when they're addressing an issue that involves historic preservation. And it keeps it easier that way. Okay, so does anyone want to push for G? Not hearing anybody. Okay, goodbye, G. Anything else in this section? Going. 15805. I see Jeff has D highlighted.
Well, let's,
Yeah, so section A, the historic preservation, and I'm reading off of the February 5th version now. The Historic Preservation Commission has the authority to assist with historic preservation efforts through building inventories, public education, tourism, and establishing community partnerships. Are we comfortable with that language? They have the authority to, but are not required to.
That seems like a legal issue with the word choice between saying has the authority and shall in the difference here. Anybody have a problem with?
Nobody has a problem with it, then it's.
There is a hand up from the commission.
I think where I would just want some clarification with Jeff's definition. We have always talked about these things kind of being able to be homegrown, grassroots. So if it's a requirement that the Preservation Commission, sorry, I'm just rereading the, is part of the building inventory, that might suggest that, you know, if my neighbor and 6 of his neighbors want to get together and do their own inventory, that we would not, it wouldn't be possible. That their inventory would mean nothing because, you know, it wasn't done by the Historic Preservation Commission.
Okay, so you're suggesting that the original A is the best language.
I'm suggesting that, yeah,
Okay.
I'm not talking for, I can't.
Makes
say
sense.
but-
All right. So we stay with the original A. Is anyone opposed to that? Okay. What else do we have from 158.05?
E is highlighted, but
Jeff, you have D highlighted. Is there a reason?
Yeah, so the original version is the commission shall conduct or cause to be conducted. Who are we causing to conduct a continuing survey of all buildings, and this is the language in the original ordinance, of all buildings, districts, landmarks, objects, sites, or structures which are of architectural, historic, cultural, environmental, and aesthetic interest in the city, and which the commission believes on the basis of information available or presented to it are or will be eligible for designation as a listed property or historic district. So if I'm reading this section correctly, we are giving the commission the ability to cause to be conducted a continuing survey of any object in the city of Bowling Green. Is that correct? I guess I'd like more clarification on what the continuing survey is going to be and whether this is a power or a duty.
I think I agree with Jeff. Right now, the way it's written, it's a requirement. This commission must do this. Shall.
Or cause it to be done.
it's may, isn't that permissive?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of
The
Okay.
original
My,
document.
my version is may, the original version is shall conduct or cause to be
That's what I
conducted.
mean. We took it right from the CLG checklist. Conduct or cause to be conducted a continuing survey of cultural resources in the community according to guidelines established by SHPO. That's just one of them. There's others that may pertain. I'm looking real quick.
But what, again, the question, I have the same question. What does a continuing survey consist of? What is that? I mean, once a year you get up and walk around the town. I mean, what does a continuing survey mean?
I think the word continuing is there to indicate that a one-time through wouldn't be enough. I mean, it would certainly start with a one-time review of anything in the city that looks like, you know, has a reasonable claim on being declared historic. But, you know, it can't stop there because lifetime will go on, and well, continuing means from time to time as needed, as new properties are built. Well, not so much that, as time goes by and more properties reach the 50-year limit, et cetera, et cetera. I think
So
that's
the,
continuing is there.
so the intent here is though, for this to include all property, maybe all property of historic significance in the city of Bowling Green, and not just listed property, contributing property, non-contributing property, historic district, whatever. We're talking about all property in the city that is or may be of historic significance.
Yeah.
according to the- Okay,
And was there an issue with the may and the shall?
well, shall suggests that they will do it, whereas may
Yeah,
means that they can if, at their discretion, I guess.
and you've changed it to may.
Well, it's, and again, I highlighted it for discussion because this is a pretty significant undertaking, it sounds like to me.
I prefer may.
But is it also not true, again, this question is for the commission, is it also not true that once you've looked at the town, I mean, it's going to be clear where you've got 50-plus-year-old structures and you don't. Subsequently, you're just, and then you've got districts that are approved, your pool of properties that need to be looked at on an annual basis shrinks, does it not? I mean, it'll grow a little bit as age, you know, as somebody goes from 49 to 50 years old. But you've looked at, would seem to me that it wouldn't be burdensome moving forward.
I would say the reason a survey could be updated is if you keep discovering more historic interest or history of properties. So we want to update the survey. Because I mean, we're starting out on some of this. It'd be like doing some history studies just to.
But I go back to, I understand why now, and I understand the goal, but I still don't understand the mechanics of it. So when you, this language as it stands right now will require the commission to do this survey. Is that again, is this a walking tour of the city? Is it a map review? What is it?
Well, we need to determine that, and we're still in the process of deciding how that will take place. But I think the word continuing could mean it's going to be continued in 10 years. It doesn't mean that we're going to be doing this every 3 months. That's how I would interpret that word. We could change that word if that's helpful.
Well, I mean, this is on the checklist, so something related to this has to be on here.
Yes, and part of it is being a certified local government. They don't want you sitting all year. They want you to be a very active CLG that's looking at your historic properties constantly and updating those. And you're supposed to do the survey in accordance with what's provided by SHPO. So it's not like we're going to do this on our own. We're going to consult with SHPO at the best methodology for that. And also we're able to obtain grants being a CLG. So that's part of that key. If there's a cost involved, then we want to go after those grants, but we can't do any of that until ordinance is approved.
Sorry, the acronym SHPO stands for,
State Historic Preservation Office.
they have guidelines for a survey.
Yes.
Can we not simply add language in accordance with the most current version of this SHPO document? We don't have to cite that version. Would that be helpful?
I was just going to comment that this to me sounded like the type of time when you don't want to define it. As soon as you say what a continuing survey is, then they have to do it.
Right. I think we ought to just give them some latitude to decide what that is.
Yeah, I mean, because otherwise we're going to say, well, you know, if it was challenged, as long as they've in good faith done a continuing survey, then that's that.
And again, much of the language of the ordinance comes right from the checklist, just so we can go back right in where it's referenced and mark that it's been done, yes or no.
So we want it to go back to shall. It's been changed to may.
No, nothing's been changed.
No, my suggestion would be we leave the original D. That would be my suggestion. As opposed to changing it. One, because we don't want to overly define it as to the nature of what they'll be doing, and also because we don't want to create any possible problem with the checklist that they have to abide by. So my motion will be we keep the original D here. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign? Okay,
All right, Mr. President, I have a question concern with item C,
okay.
and that is that it just seems to be putting the cart before the horse here. I don't know what the intent is, but the language is very confusing. That before you get an application, you've got to review the plan. It just seems awkward. And awkward, it's written awkwardly, and it doesn't very well, needs to be changed. If it's C, 15805C. I'm going for the original. Yeah, so this work shall be done in the period before the commission receives an application. Well, if you haven't received an application, how do you know what you need to do?
The intent here was to deal with a situation which I think would very often be the case, that the city will learn informally in advance of any formal applications by developers or whatever of a plan to do A or B or C. City itself may, before it does any public announcements of such plans, propose to do something. And the intent is to make sure that the Historic Preservation Commission gets a chance to have its opinions considered in such situations. So it's a reference to pre-formal anything where information is available. Sometimes there will not be information
Is there
available.
anything in this document, if we took C out, is there anything stopping you from doing that? There's not, I mean, is there language in here that prevents that? I don't think so. No, I mean, really, seriously, I don't think there's anything preventing that. This language makes no sense. I mean, the way it's written, I understand your intent. And I agree with you. That seems like a reasonable course of action if you're on the commission. But item C doesn't provide any benefit to the document. The way it's- That works. That still conveys your intent. Again, I point out that you're free as a commission to do exactly what you're describing without being required to do so in this document.
So we're going to take out where it starts with this work.
Yes, that was what Mr. Marsh suggested. I concur with that.
All right. Does anyone have a problem with removing this work shall be done in the period before the commission receives an application from an owner or tenant?
No problem.
Okay, so there we go. Line that out.
And again, Les, I don't think that ties the commission's hands at all. As a matter of fact, it doesn't change anything.
Okay, so the original language.
Just without the last sentence. Okay, what else do we have in 15805?
Mr. President,
Yep,
I think all of the criteria under I 1 through 5, I think those make more sense in the next section, 158.06, that deals with, or excuse me, 158.07, which deals with COA applications. And so you'll just see that when we get to 158.07, that's where I stuck them. And so if we end up going with using them there, we would strike them here.
okay. So does that mean we we are done with 158.05.
I have one more question, Mr. President, on item number F. Again, it deals with the requirement shall. Commission shall conduct public hearings to consider or determine. I guess my question is, when are these public hearings required? And is it prior to the initial designation? Is it a prior upon occurrence of everything in section H below, which lays out some, what types of applications are? Is it when does that kick in? When does the requirement for public hearings kick in?
The intent is that they be exactly like public hearings required by the Planning Commission and City Council. That is, they kick in after a proposal has been developed, but before the HPC votes to recommend to council. So it's a chance for public input prior to an HPC vote to recommend.
Prior
That's
to
the
an
intent.
HPC vote to recommend.
Right.
And can we change that language then to reflect that?
Rachel, do you feel like your procedures later clarify that point?
I mean, I attempted
comment.
to. I had kind of the same questions when I was in this section, and but I wonder if I thought maybe the intent here was just, that the commission shall act in public, just kind of like a broad for statement like that, and then we drill down on when public hearings are required with COAs and designation later.
Does this fit in? Does this
Yes.
item, Rachel, fit in better in your revised?
It's just listing the duties.
Yeah, I think a general statement here, like the commission shall act in public, that to me doesn't, is fine. But I also can see just getting rid of it here, because I think that I think later the specific instances where a public hearing is required are made clear.
Doesn't matter to me, but this particular paragraph is dealing just with the designations. And so what I was thinking was just add a little language to the beginning of this, that prior to an HBC decision, the commission shall conduct a public hearing. And then the rest. Because the later stuff has to do with other HOC requirements. And I thought the point of this section, and I had the same question Greg did, but I thought the point of this section was just dealing with designation of historic districts and not the HOCs.
Oh, sorry. Now I'm reading the language. I'm sorry. I'm reading the original language. And yes, it certainly says designation. So then my answer later clearly addresses public hearings in the designation scenario. So then I think that this can go.
Okay.
And Mr. Marsh, seeing as how the Historic Preservation Commission is a commission for the city of Bowling Green, do not all of the meetings need to be open?
Oh, sure.
And lobby visitation, a portion of those
yeah.
meetings? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
So we've decided we do not need F.
Yeah, I think Rachel's pointed out that we will address this issue, public hearings, when we get into the meat of those revised sections 06, 07, and 08.
Okay. All right, so goodbye F. What else do we have in 158.05? We're good. Okay. Which brings us to 158.06, where we have adopted what Rachel has brought forward.
Jeff or Rachel had a suggestion for T that's important.
For what?
For T, as in Timothy.
Yeah, and we touched on this at our earlier meeting when we decided to have this meeting. The commission shall have the authority to monitor any nominations of any property. Well, the commission shall have the authority- any property for National Historic Landmark designation, as determined by the process through the National Park Service. I guess I'm still. I mean, is that section clear to everybody else?
It's, to me, it's something that has, man, you have to have it in there, but you don't intend to use it.
I think that Heather will need to back me up on this. I think that we can have no authority on nominating for national landmark status, but we could monitor it, be helpful with it, whatever. So I think the original language is not appropriate.
I think that's just a typo. I think it should just be the National Register that's referenced later in that same section T.
What's a typo? I'm sorry.
Instead of saying National Historic Landmark designation, it should be the National Register.
Yeah, but we deal with that with you. So either T should go entirely, or it should
Yeah.
just say, that the commission will, assist with, monitor, or whatever, any attempt to seek national landmark status.
Well, in the revised one that Jeff gave us, it says the commission shall monitor any nomination of any property of historic significance. Are we suggesting we get rid of T, or are we suggesting we change it to what Jeff has suggested?
Either is fine, I
Yeah.
think, with the commission.
But they do have the power to nominate. So it's a little more than monitor.
Oh, so we do want nominate in there.
So the commission can nominate any property.
No, register.
Yeah.
So you think we need to leave nominate? Yeah.
Okay,
that
what
what
we've
you
heard
said?
from Les is that item T is not that important to this document, that the powers in U are more relevant. And if that's the case, why don't we just eliminate it?
Okay.
Take a
Aye.
few sentences of brevity.
And U is one that had a change. Second line, instead of it reading in accordance with Ohio's codified local ordinances, should be Ohio's certified local government guidelines.
Right, that was one of those changes we already accepted, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So did we decide to get rid of T?
I believe we got rid of T.
Does anyone want to keep T?
Unless somebody would like to speak now in favor of T.
The commission is going to recommend it's going away. Let's go away.
Okay, so now I think we're at 158.06, 7 and 8. Rachel did a lot of heavy lifting on this. So I don't know what specific things people want to address in this section.
I had a chance to think about it since I learned from Jeff that Rachel, Jeff, and members of the at least one member of the commission and maybe more worked on this weekend. So I would just like to know from either of you which issues still remain after having worked on it. Is there anything that you feel is missing or needs to be added or deleted?
Jeff, why don't I let you talk about, I have not had a conversation with anyone on the HPC about my initial comment at the top of 158.06, right? So whether or not we should just add the criteria that a property be 50 years old as one of the listed criteria, because my reading of the original document or the original proposed language was it could be less than 50 years old if it was indisputably unique and significant as a representation of Bowling Green's identity. So if the age of the property is just one factor being considered and properties under 50 can be designated, if one of the other requirements is met, perhaps we move 50 years old as a listed criteria and then require properties to meet 2 or more criteria listed instead of just 1. I have not discussed that with anyone on the HPC. I would be interested to hear what they think. So that's the first one out of the
You're suggesting moving 50 years old down to this list of things and changing it from one thing plus 50 years old to any 2 things.
Right. If that changes things for the HPC or if that's what they intended. They actually did, clearly they didn't intend that, but if you can list a property if it's at least 50 years old or if it's less than 50 years old and is indisputably unique and significant, then to me, you can list a property at any age if it meets another criteria as well.
I think we're fine with the new arrangement that you've provided, Rachel.
So I think Jeff actually provided that. Jeff, are you still sharing your screen? Yeah. So Jeff rewrote this.
Okay, Jeff.
Do exactly that.
we certainly can accept that if the council can.
So 2 or more criteria. So then the HPC would be documenting that a property met 2 of these listed criteria, one of which could be that it is at least
50 years old.
Right.
Okay.
I accept it.
Does anyone have a problem with that change? Okay.
Do you all have a copy of that?
No.
I
It's-
don't have,
Part of what was copied that Jeff put together.
with the definitions too?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Was it in there?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's
yes,
just
it
2
is.
or more of the following criteria.
Got it?
And number 1 is as at least 50 years old.
Yep.
Rachel's, we had drafted this together, so it would have been in her final draft. So if it's not in mine, then that.
No, it's in the thing that you sent to us that we had printed out.
It just isn't underlined.
Yeah. It's in 158.06A. So it sounds like no one has a problem with that. Okay, what's the next thing we have?
When we get to section D on the February 5th version, it's the section that says, in the case of proposed historic districts, the commission shall conduct a written survey of all owners of properties within such a district and report the results of that survey along with its recommendations in writing to city council. And then it says, at least a simple majority of the owners choosing to respond to the written survey must agree to the creation of a district before the commission may forward a recommendation for designation. In the email that I sent out, I strongly suggested that instead of it saying at least a simple majority of the owners choosing to respond to the written survey, it say at least a simple majority of the owners must agree. And the rationale for that, I guess, is maybe brought out through an example. If there was a district with 10 property owners and the survey goes out and 5 property owners respond, 3 of which say yes, 2 say no, then according to the wording as it is here, a district could move forward with just 3 yeses, which is not a majority of the property owners, just the majority of those that for one reason or another responded. And those that did not respond, we do not know exactly why they did not respond. And so my modification is that it be at least a simple majority of the owners. So if there's 10 owners, you would need at least 6 yeses to be assured that a majority of the properties are saying yes to this.
But Bill, if only 5 respond, then that will never occur. If you need 6 out of 10 and 5 respond, you send out 100 things, you're going to get 50 back. I mean, that's just, you're going to get 30 back. So how does that operationalize?
It's kind of like which side do you want to err on? And if we're relying on a survey, we don't know the content of the survey. We don't know necessarily if it goes to everybody, and there might be a way to do registered mail. We don't know whether the people will actually bother opening it. I mean, if you're like me, you get tons of mail from all sorts of places. So to be safe that yes, of these 10 properties, we have a majority that want to do this, then we make sure that we have at least 6 people that say yes. Now, whether it's a survey or whether it's a petition or a phone call or some alternate way, not just a mailed survey, to make sure that we have a majority of the property owners. It would be a shame if, we had the situation that for reasons we could come up with, and probably more importantly, reasons we can't think of right now, we don't get enough people to respond. Then what's happening is, for reasons necessarily other than the property owner's desire to be a part of it, they are basically counted out. And that to me is, I'm really apprehensive about that. We want to make sure that there's a majority. I mean, we're not saying a super majority. We're saying a majority are in favor of this. We want to be darn sure that we have a majority that are in favor of this.
Right. Mr. President, let me ask Mr. Marsh a question. Would, for example, a requirement that notice and survey, and again, I've got a question in an earlier section we can get to in a minute on what is a survey, but a document, if we're informing the owners, can we use a certified mail and language that if there's no reply, we're going to assume it's a positive response or some such language like that? And have certified mail so we got guarantee that it got where it was going?
Well, sure. And certified mail is probably important to do for something like this. This is what we do with other notices around here. Same thing. In terms of telling people that a no response is affirmative, I'm just having experience with that this week with the utilities office, and maybe some of you got this mail from a company soliciting you to break away from gas aggregation with our city and join them. And the notice actually says that a no response will be taken as your affirmation that you want this new company to take you on as a customer. I don't know that we can tell somebody that their no response is a yes and have that really hold up. Yeah. I don't know what the legal significance of
Well, I was just a
we
question.
we can make sure we know something got delivered. We can see who signed for it. I mean, we can get it to that point, but I don't know how you guarantee a response. I guess if there are people that are proponents of this for a particular district, they probably ought to go door to door in their neighborhood and generate support for that. Because I think, as I read the intention of this act, it's to create these districts when there is a majority of ownership that supports it. So I don't think we want to inadvertently do that when that's not the case, or at least that's how I read what the intent is here. Am I right? I guess I should look this way. Yeah, I don't think anybody's trying to do something that people don't know is taking place.
Oh.
But I guess I don't know how you guarantee that you get a response without you wait on the mail, and if they don't all come back, I suppose it's up to staff or Heather and me to try and reach out to owners and find out why they haven't responded.
But I mean, John's question is a good one though. I mean, if if we send certified mail and we still don't get, you only get,
Mhm.
you get less than the number of responses to constitute a majority.
Mhm.
Is that the next step? The city's just got to be proactive? Because we are going to be talking about small numbers of properties here. I mean, no district's
Probably.
going to be very large, right?
Probably.
I mean, that's just not the
And
way. the
it's
city is.
easy to determine owners, as you know. I mean,
Yeah.
I do it with my other hat on all day, every day. So that can be done and we can find where they are.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, most of the time we know them, don't we, Heather? So, so probably we could follow up with people and find out
Okay.
why they haven't responded.
Okay, so then the recommendation is to change the language to a majority vote of property owners as opposed
In the
to,
proposed district.
right, as
Yeah.
opposed to just a majority of respondents.
Mhm.
Because the assumption here is that we're going to reach out to these folks and we're going to get an answer one way or the other.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I would say change it so that it is a majority of property owners in the proposed area
Mhm.
that are for the designation.
Could I make a modest suggestion? I mean, the survey is a word that we probably shouldn't have used. Maybe to simplify, you could just drop small 2 and 3 and just say at least a simple majority of owners must agree in writing to the creation of historic district.
That would be fine with
As
me.
proof that,
Yeah, that
proof
would
that
be
they
fine.
have in fact agreed.
Well, do we need, again, I go back, do we need writing? Because
Yeah, 'cause
Yeah, I
the
think-
lack of a writing we just described, maybe a personal follow-up by Heather or
Someone
the city
knocking on the
attorney.
door, making a phone
And,
call.
and that verbal acknowledgement should suffice, should it not, Mr. Marsh?
Just two thoughts for your consideration. The first, it's not that silence is a no, it's just that you need a majority of those who choose to respond. So it's not the case that, or the silence is a yes, either way. If you're just not counted the same way that, with like a election, right? It's of those who choose to show up. Second, just as a reminder, I mean, if you had the parade of horribles scenario where it's 10 owners and 3 respond and 2 say yes, you still have the city council check. This has still got to go to council. And so you have the ability at that point to say, hold on, we only had 3 out of 10 respond. So it's not the case that this to me just seems like pragmatically, you're not going to get everyone to respond. You don't want to get the city to expend all the resources to go out and get everyone to respond. You use registered mail, folks got it. If they choose not to, then it's not that it's yes or no for them. They just, their voice isn't counted at their discretion. So I just wanted to make those 2 points.
And to add to that, there are multiple notifications just based on how we are required to notify for public hearings.
So the multiple notifications and the multiple modes of getting to a point where we have written permission or written yes, however you want to put the document together, from a majority of the property owners, then we are assured that a majority of the property owners are in favor of this. Any other scenario, we don't have that assurance. And the idea of council being a check, well, it's there to be a check, not to be necessarily an embedded part of the process to be used all the time. It's a fail-safe, if you will. So maybe we wouldn't get to the point of that if we just simply, our intent is, however the mechanism is, we get a majority of the people in that, of the property owners in that area to say, yes, we wish to do this. And that's the whole intent here, is to err on the side of being assured that we do have a majority of the property owners saying, yes, we want this. Anything else is a guess.
I've got one more comment. I'm sorry. I'm just reminded, and I'll defer to HPC on this, but I think if you compare this to other towns, I think this is a very, for lack of a word, I mean, this is a conservative way to do it versus the HPC just gets to do it without input from owners and things like that. So this is already, if you want to have historical preservation, you got to make some steps. And this is already one that I think reflects a more conservative approach than a lot of other communities have taken, in which they do not require this type of input. They don't require the majority of owners to weigh in. So I don't know what those are offhand. I'm going to guess that you guys do, or maybe someone out there. So just the final comment on that.
And
Mr. President,
One moment, please.
Sorry, Jeff. If I can add one thing, defining what an owner is. We found I think a very good definition from Ashtabula, the city of Ashtabula, as far as how they defined an owner. For purposes of this section, an owner is defined as the person or entity holding title of one or more parcels of land within the proposed district. And each owner shall have one vote, regardless of how many parcels within the proposed district are owned by that person or entity. And that could be an issue that I think we need to.
We don't have that in the February 5th
that
version,
is
so
not
we
in.
want to change that.
Right.
And Mike, does that meet your concern with multiple parcels? You had a concern to be cautious about our wording that included parcels.
No, Mark was responding to a misuse of words by me. Okay, I just wrote the wrong word down. My intent was exactly the way Mike suggested the correction be. My intent was different than this. My intent was to define an owner as the owner of an individual address.
Oh.
That was my intent. And the
Okay.
parcel word, I inserted in there inappropriately and Mike corrected me. So
I think you're.
Good with what John recommended? Okay,
Yeah,
we're back to owner now.
We're back to owner, and we're back to a property as a layperson would consider it, an address.
Huh.
Because parcel's kind of a term of art because of how the county auditor divides, as you know, in your business.
Real
And,
estate,
you
yeah.
know, you can have unusual circumstances and we didn't want to have votes be based on parcels. Yeah, so I think we're all in the same place.
Okay, but I believe we were on.
yeah, we were on changing it from of those that respond to a survey to a
Right.
majority of the property owners in the district or in the area.
All right.
And for me, I understand all the arguments that one city does things differently than another city is interesting to know, but we're Bowling Green. And we also know, and goodness, the Historic Preservation Commission and the Planning Commission know this as well as anybody, that there's different sections and different trade-offs in trying to achieve the right balance. And for me, the right balance is do a majority of the property owners in that area wish to have this done? If they do, great, a majority, not a supermajority, and not per property, but per property owner. That's all part of the balancing act. So here, it's per property, per property owner, and it's a simple majority. And so we add to this combination that it is a simple majority of the property owners in that district that assent to doing this.
Mr. President.
Did you have something you wanted to add?
I did. I think that we've already done quite a bit of balancing. Councilman Harold's right. We are Bowling Green. We have.
I was just going to vote.
Yeah, I would be happy for that. I'm not going to vote to further weaken this law, which is the result of 18 months of compromise and public input. I'm perfectly fine sending things out with registered mail so that we know that the recipient gets it. And if the majority of the recipients see this and choose not to vote, that happens year in and year out at every election we have. Some people don't want to participate, and that's okay.
Okay. So the issue at hand is whether we leave it as it is now, which is a majority of affirmative respondents, or if we change it and for lack of being corrected, the general idea being an affirmative answer from the majority of property owners within the district. So 50% plus one. So that's what what I'm going to put up for a vote is changing it to from a majority of respondents to a majority of property owners having responded in the affirmative. So all in favor of that change, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And maybe we need to do a show of hands. That sounded like this could be a little tricky.
Yeah.
I
was
can't
still
see
thinking.
Rachel though.
So I did not raise my hand. I would like it to stay as is.
Okay, so here we go. All in favor of making that change, raise your hand.
So could you read the change one more time? Sorry about that, but what is the suggested change?
The suggested change is changing it from a majority of respondents, which it is right now, changing it to a majority of property owners responding in the affirmative. So it puts a heavier burden on creating a district.
So it puts a more accurate burden on determining what the majority wants.
Correct. Do you understand, John?
I'm sorry, I'm being so dense, but one more time, Mark, a majority.
Okay, the way it is right now,
Right.
let's say there are 10 people, we send out 10 surveys to people.
Mhm.
Okay. If the majority we get back, let's say we get 4 back and 3 say yes and 1 says no, okay, then it's a district. The suggested change being that since there are, let's say 10, we would have to get, well, would it be 50% or 51% responding yes? So it would increase the amount of respondents that would have to be in the affirmative.
And
Mark, I don't want to nitpick,
we would
but
do things
the
now.
way you first described that, it would just allow the designation process to start. And then after that, we're going to talk about this in a public hearing in the HPC, a public hearing at Planning Commission, a public hearing in council. It doesn't create a historic district. It
No,
just
no,
is
I
that first
understand.
I know. I just wanted John. I mean, just to be
You
clear.
understand what we're voting on?
Yeah.
So I still think that that's a burden that is going to really restrict the creation of zones. I think
Mhm.
people don't answer mail.
Well,
So,
then you would not vote for this.
and that's my argument why I would not. yeah.
Okay. So show of hands. Who is in favor of this? Raise your hand. Is that a hand up?
No.
Jeff, is your hand up?
No.
Rachel, is your hand up?
It is not.
Okay. All who are opposed to this, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay.
Now, did
So-
you see what you just did? You got a vote from all 7. If people hadn't raised their hand, they would have been a no vote.
And we'd have to live with it.
Mr. President, I do think that we could add, make clear that we'd like to send this survey by certified mail. I think that would probably be wise.
Okay. Can we include that language, Mike? Okay. It's taken care of.
Done.
Okay. Where are we at now?
Where were we?
We were
I
on
lost myself so long.
158.06
I was on B as in Delta.
D.
No, we're on, remember, we agreed to use Rachel's revised document and that section was
Yeah.
that was 06B 1.1.3.
Okay.
Can I back up a moment? We also agreed to change the definition of owners to that of,
No, we haven't changed, we haven't had any
we didn't
agreement to
agree,
change.
but I mean, we
No,
need to
we
agree.
haven't agreed to do anything.
We're
Okay,
not doing definitions right now.
okay.
We're in 158.06. Is there anything else anyone wants to bring up about?
Rachel, you want to talk about your margin comments?
Sure. I was, yep, sure. Okay, so, where, I mean, I noted that so we were just in B1.3 and B1.5. I changed that from shall to may. So when we have required that a individual property not be listed until the owner consents to that listing. And it originally said that once the owner consents to that listing, the commission shall make a recommendation concerning the designation of the property. And I changed that to, it said shall, I changed it to may. It seemed like we should give the commission discretion, but that was a substantive change. In step 2, so you see step 2 right below that, the commission review and recommendation section. A substantive change was I added that the notification of the hearing shall be published at least 10 days in advance of such hearing in a paper of general circulation in the city. I made that up. I don't know. I mean, that should track whatever our normal council commission notice procedure is. And so I would defer to Mike Marsh there. I didn't know that. And then in step 3, I asked the question, should we be referring to actual sections of our existing zoning code because we're updating our code? Presumably all those numbers are going to change. I think we can accomplish the same end by saying, just giving a title of the section as it currently exists. They're just kind of referencing zoning map amendment section. So again, if you guys have strong opinions there, awesome. If not, Mr. Marsh can decide that, and that is a-okay with me. I did make a substantive change in step 4. So once council approves the listing of a property, we are required to notify the owner of such a decision. And then I added language that the notification shall include information on where the owner can locate the information from this chapter, any applicable design guidelines, and any applicable historic inventories. So just an understanding that we're going to make the property owner aware of what their new obligations are. And then another substantive change is I added a rescinding of designation section, which is the end of this. And, the current draft or the proposed draft, the February 5th draft was silent on rescinding, and it seemed like a good idea to address in some way. And I thought it was important here to make sure that council didn't just rescind of its own accord, that there is a requirement that we make the Historic Preservation Commission aware that we are considering that.
Okay, any thoughts?
Can I go to step 3I? I just wanted to make it clear that planning commission is not required to hold a public hearing when it comes to section 150.111. So you may want to take that part out. Again, they certainly can and they often do, but just to be consistent.
Mr. President,
Yeah.
back up in step 3, I see we're allowing city council 60 days to make a determination. I guess just the timeline on this generally seems a little bit too long. I know that I believe it was maybe Mr. Marsh said that it was maybe 75 days. That that seems like a little bit too long to allow, whether it's the commission or city council, to consider any proposed COA.
We're still on designation, Jeff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Heather, what was
I
it?
hear you, but that's ruling on a COA application and we're still at the bottom of designation.
3I.
Well, step 3 says we have 60 days to review.
Yeah.
A
The
proposed designation.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Are you suggesting we remove 3I altogether?
No, just the part where it says, and the planning commission shall hold a public hearing on the designation.
Okay. So
So
in
I got
three-
that wrong. I thought the planning commission had to hold those public hearings, but if you look at 150.111, they just do as a normal course, but they're not required to. And so we should definitely make that change. Sorry, Heather.
Okay, with regard to the timeline, is that what we're going to do next? Mr. Marsh's suggestion that it was a bit long?
Well, there are two components to it, as Jeff pointed out.
I don't know which section needs to be changed, but 75 days is too long. Ask somebody to wait to repair their roof or reside their house or replace their windows.
Well,
But that's just the
I-
next section. That's the next
It's
section.
seven-
That's not very-
Right.
It's
Different.
75 plus 60, you look at these two sections together. That's even more.
Everybody's given us a very significant cushion here to schedule everything out and make their determinations.
You're not to COA yet, you're in designation.
Yeah, these 60 are about designation, so nobody's waiting on anything other than a potential
Okay.
designation.
Okay.
All right.
But that doesn't make this an unimportant issue. Is 60 days too long for designation?
So we're talking about council must act on the proposed designation within 60 days after its required public hearing. And we're suggesting changing that.
Well, let's think about that for a second. If we have a required public hearing and the public hearing is completed, I don't see any need to delay. We've met our own self-created statutory requirement.
Commission know why there was such a delay?
I think we just built in some general timelines based on
Wait,
other models and based
I'm
on
not-
the criteria. We just have to have timelines in the CLG.
I'm asking a question to all of us. Do we really, is there a benefit to doing that? I don't see one myself. Maybe there is.
For anything, this speeds up process. City government has to go.
Well, I think what Greg's saying, after the public hearing, we usually vote that very night. I mean, to add 60
Well, if it
days.
happens to be all public hearings aren't, I mean, we can't guarantee that every public hearing precedes a
Right.
meeting.
Well, we're
I
gonna, should we change it to 30 days? We're bound to
I
have
was
a
going to
meeting.
suggest the next scheduled meeting, what I was going to.
Within 15 days, I think would be appropriate. That would allow time for our next meeting to occur, right?
Well, assuming that we don't have a canceled meeting or something.
It turns out to be something like this.
If we're gonna put days, I wouldn't want to decrease it below 30.
What's wrong with the next scheduled
Or
meeting?
Greg's suggestion of next scheduled meeting seems,
Council must
Very
act on the
doable.
proposed designation at its next public meeting.
Well, regular meeting after the public hearing. Doesn't mean we can't do it sooner. We can hold a special, I mean, all the normal rules still apply. I mean, you can call a special meeting anytime
Yeah.
you want. But these are
But
just
it's next regular
minimum
meeting.
standards.
Unless we can, what if there has to be an amendment? Would there wouldn't be an amendment because it's up or down. So I don't think amendment would hold us up.
Well, our normal processes still apply. I mean,
Yeah.
nothing changes.
So we're just changing it from within 60 days to
Our next regular.
at its next regular meeting.
I think that is the shortest time frame available.
Okay. All right, what do we got next? What do we got next? Nothing? We're done?
What did we,
We're done with number 6. Yeah.
Oh, I thought we were done. 7, is there anything in 7? 07.
Well, here clearly, I mean, whatever definitions we landed on, that this all needs to be, I mean,
Right.
all of it needs to be cleaned up, but especially here, my brain's kind of spinning.
this may be a good point to take a break, Mr. President, and allow the work we've done so far to catch up to the revisions of 07 and 08. Rachel, are you suggesting that you're willing to revise your own suggested section?
I am. I do suggest that. I would love to do that.
Okay, so we're going to end the meeting for tonight, and it looks like then we'll have to have another meeting. Is that what I'm hearing?
We're having a meeting, 2 meetings next week. We're having that hour-long meeting about rental registration. And wasn't there another one we added next week or no?
I only know we have a public hearing before our council meeting,
Yeah.
which may be brief, but we do have an hour reserved, so it's an hour that's, not
You don't have to,
available.
I mean, we don't have to announce the date now. You think about it and talk to Kay, President, work it out. How you want to move forward with the committee, how you,
But John did think the meeting could have been abbreviated that hour. So if we can't really do it in a half hour.
No, so
No,
really.
that wouldn't help to
That's
do it.
not going to work that night.
That would-
it seemed to me, Mr. President, that at our next meeting, we'll consider 07, 08, and everything that follows after that with all the sections, as well as there are also amended sections of the current code, part of the process. Hopefully those will require much discussion.
Okay, and this all has to be done by our March 15th meeting, which means that it's going to have to be fairly quickly that we have another meeting, because we have to have a chance for everything to be put into the proper form and for it to be reviewed by everybody before we would vote. So I will get with Kay at my earliest available time, but it looks like we'd be looking at next week's.
I'm open for a Saturday meeting if that'll speed things along.
I would be open to a Saturday meeting as well.
All right, well. Okay, so what do we got going on? Rachel, you're gonna update things?
Yeah, so what I have signed up for is updating 158 and 07 and 08 using the definitions that we agreed to today. Is that right? So making those, I mean, is that what I agreed to? Tell me, I'm happy to do anything. Just tell me what I agreed to.
That's the way I understand it.
Okay, and then at the next meeting, we'll work off that document.
Okay.
And then the other sections will still be off the February 5th. 09 and forward will be off the February 5th document if we did tonight, right?
Right.
Okay.
Okay, well, that's it. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again next week.